Good evening, everyone. May we please ask everyone to come forward and find a seat so we can get started with the program. Thank you so much.
We'll give everyone a little more time to get a seat. There are some seats available still, some up front as well. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 16th Annual Mississippi on the Potomac reception. Tonight, we gather once more to renew our alliance with colleagues here in Washington, D.C., and we're going to recommit ourselves every single year to bringing racial justice and equal opportunity to the state of Mississippi. We're delighted this evening to pay tribute to two distinguished and dynamic advocates, George Ladner and Robert Raymond, both of whom have devoted their lives working to promote civil justice and voting rights. During these turbulent times in our nation and in our state, we know that the work of the Mississippi Center for Justice is more important now than ever. Over the past year, we have continued to pursue litigation under the George Riley Impact Litigation Initiative, which you will hear more about a little later in the program, along with an update on our work in education and housing. We continue our work to challenge disparities in education, to fight against stigma and discrimination for persons living with HIV, to help homeowners avoid foreclosure, and to ensure that low-income Mississippians have fair and equal access to housing. And even still, we know that there is so much more to do. Let me conclude by expressing on behalf of the Center's board, staff, and clients that we serve, our gratitude to each and every one of you in this room. The work of the Mississippi Center for Justice would not be possible without your encouragement and loyal support. We thank you. I'd like now to just give you a hand of applause. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce the President and CEO of the Mississippi Center for Justice, Riley Morse.
Thank you. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here once more with you all, and welcome to the 2018 Mississippi on the Potomac reception. As Laverne mentioned, next month will mark the 16th year as our state's homegrown, home-owned civil rights legal organization. We have operations in our headquarters in Jackson and also in our offices in Biloxi and Indianola. In a moment, we'll share with you some of the Center's work to promote racial and economic justice in our state, and later we'll pay tribute to two terrific advocates for civil and voting rights, Joyce Ladner and Robert Raymond. But first, let us express our thanks to our event's co-chairs, Mark Fleischacker, Sharlethia Franklin, Karen Lash, Benjamin Wilson, Donald Varelli Jr., and Tony West. Thank you all. We also want to thank our underwriters, Bergman, Draper, Osland, Barbara and David Lippman, and our champions of justice, Latham and Watkins, Munger, Tolles and Olson, O'Melveny and Myers, Dr. Edward Bergmark, and Ellen Weiss. Thank you all. Finally, I want to thank each and every one of you who are here tonight. Your support makes possible the strides towards a more just Mississippi taken every day by our lawyers, organizers, and staff, and the pro bono lawyers, community leaders, and allies we work with in Mississippi and across the nation. Would the members of our staff who are here tonight please stand to be recognized? Thank you. Thanks to you all. Thanks to you all, and special thanks to Lauren Welford, Dana Thomas, and Monica Galloway for the event preparation and the attention to detail that makes this event a success. Thanks, ladies. Next, we'd like the Center's Board of Directors who are present tonight to stand to be recognized for their dedication to our work. We're very grateful for an outstanding board. Thank you. So let's take a moment now to hear a little more about how MCJ advances racial and economic justice from three of the attorneys on our team, Jeremy Eisler, Kiara Tate, and Rob McDuff. If y'all could come forward. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. For those of you who I have not met, I'm Jeremy Eisler. I'm the director of our educational campaign, along with my colleague Deborah Giles and our pro bono partners. I've been told brevity is the soul of wit. I've also been told I'm not as witty as I think I am. And I think that's why they've only given me 5 minutes. That was a laugh line. For the coming year, I'll try to be brief. For the coming year, our education campaign is going to focus on bullying and discipline issues. And the reason why is that we know from national survey that 1 in 5 students is likely to be bullied. Bullying leads to loss of school days, it leads to suspensions, it leads to dropouts, it leads to suicides. In extreme circumstances, as we all know from looking at the news, it on occasion leads to mass shootings in schools, unfortunately. Mississippi has approximately 600,000 students. You would think if we lived up to the national average that we would have approximately 1 in 5 students being bullied, 100,000 students being bullied in Mississippi. In statistics, the most recently available statistics collected by the Mississippi Department of Education, they say that only 300 bullying complaints are filed in an average year in Mississippi, about 1/4% of what you would expect. So at the Center for Justice, we wondered why this might be. We did a survey of all 148 school districts in the state. What we found surprised us. We found that almost 200 instances where school districts were out of compliance with Title IX. We found 79 districts which didn't have a Title IX grievance policy. We found 71 school districts which didn't have a Title IX coordinator. Title IX is the statute which, among other things, addresses bullying based on gender differences. We found 36 districts, which I guess they were honest, they hadn't filed a certificate of compliance with Title IX. Mississippi also has a bullying statute, recently enacted July of last year. It's a great statute. It says that schools should prohibit bullying. It also says that employees are required to report bullying. It requires them to establish procedures for investigating bullying and addressing it. It also recognizes that students who are bullied have a right of self-defense because, as often happens when you get hit by a bully, you might hit them back, and what we discover is that children then get expelled for fighting. So the statute tried to address that by recognizing a right of self-defense. When we looked around the state, we discovered that approximately 90 school districts had not established grievance policies for bullying. 36 districts didn't recognize a right of self-defense, And so we thought this was something that we could perhaps look into, and if you looked at our website, you can see that it's an initiative. And it has already started to result in people contacting us. I want to share with you a few cases that have come in which will give you an idea why this emphasis on bullying is important in the context of our state, what's coming of it, and what we're hoping to do. Imagine for a moment that you're a 14-year-old homeless boy. You're living in a tent in a trailer park, and you've just moved into a new school. And as you might expect, you get picked on when you go there. And so there's a video of you on the bus being beaten up by a child who is twice your size. It's on video. After about 5-10 seconds, you start hitting the bully back. Your father files a bullying complaint. The school says to you, "Oh, it's not bullying. Bullying requires multiple instances before we recognize it as bullying. So much for your bullying complaint. And we're going to suspend your child for fighting back." And the dad says, "Well, I read there's a right of self-defense." And the school says, "Oh, no, we define the right of self-defense as the right to file a bullying complaint." So that case came in to us about 3 weeks ago. And as I speak to you, we've looked at the school district's policies in addition to this bizarre interpretation of what constitutes bullying. And I have to say to you that this interpretation is drawn from the State School Board Association, which promulgates model policy, so other districts have this interpretation. They also don't recognize that you aren't supposed to discriminate based on national origin, which is a Title VI violation. They also don't have a Title IX coordinator. So we filed a petition with the school board. We hope to have them change their definitions, have his record expunged, and have the consequences of the bullying addressed. And if that doesn't happen, I hope it does. If it doesn't, we will file suit for a declaratory judgment and try to get this clarified, because this is a brand new statute effective July. It has not been interpreted, and this is a widespread issue, both as our survey has demonstrated and as real life is bringing to our door. Another case that's come in recently, a young girl, 12 years old, blind, Braille user. Parents contacted us because she was being bullied by her teacher, who had ridiculed her for not being able to keep up with the rest of the class. We investigated and discovered that she was not being given a Braille textbook. 2 of her classes had no Braille textbooks. The one class that did have a Braille textbook, there was another Braille user in the class, so that both of them had to share that textbook. Neither one of them was allowed to take the text home. The school said, "Oh, well, the teacher embosses the materials." But in a mathematics textbook, you have graphs, which the teacher didn't know how to emboss. So what made this case particularly striking is this child attends the Mississippi School for the Blind. You would think if there was one school in the state where you would have adequate access to Braille textbooks, which incidentally is mandated by state statute, which says blind students must be provided textbooks in the same manner as every other student and allowed to take them home in the same manner as every other student. There are also CFR regulations that address this. If there was one school where this would not be a problem, it would be the School for the Blind, but this is where it is happening. So as I speak to you, she is now being provided with textbooks. We will be filing a due process action to get her compensatory education. I'll give you one more case. Imagine you're a 17-year-old girl. You have a learning disability, and a boy in your class prevails upon you, bullies you to have sex with him, and then you get expelled because you were found engaging in sexual relations in the bathroom. We had that case. We discovered that the young woman's learning disability, she had had it since she'd been in the school. She'd been in the school since the 2nd grade. It had never been identified. So we got her qualified for the SPED program. We got her compensatory education. The school did not have any standard whatsoever, no standard of proof for expulsion hearings. We prevailed on them to adopt a standard of proof for expulsion proceedings. It's the first school district in Mississippi to have adopted one at the time. But the other thing we discovered, which was just mind-boggling to us, is they had expelled her, then referred her to the alternative school, but they didn't provide transportation to the alternative school. We know, as a matter of statistics, that students who are most at risk of dropping out are those who have been suspended. Well, imagine how much at risk you are if, in addition to being suspended and sent to alternative school, you're not given bus transportation to the alternative school. You know, at a minimum, you're going to lose, if your parents don't have transportation, as many poor parents don't, you're going to lose a school year. So this is a violation of state law. We persuaded the school that they needed to provide her and the other students transportation. The school district, which is an A-rated school district, is now providing transportation. We did another statewide survey, found 12 other school districts which were not providing transportation. We identified them to the Department of Education. They're now doing so with one exception. They have a policy which says, well, if we refer you to alternative school because you got in a fight, we won't provide you transportation. This is also a violation of state law, and hopefully we're looking for a client there now to address this. So what we've done is we've developed a workshop and a PowerPoint on students' rights with regard to bullying and with discipline. We have Amelia Hutchins. We've just gotten an Equal Justice Works Fellow who's coming to join us. She's going to spend the next 2 years going around the state, conducting these workshops, finding clients, along with the issues like those I've just discussed with you tonight that inevitably accompany them, because it's never simple. There's always multiple issues when someone comes with you and you unpack them. And we hope that in the process of doing this, we've targeted the workshops for the districts which are most out of compliance, that we will also bring their policies and procedures into compliance and find the clients to help us do that. In closing, I hope I've at least been brief. I have a lot more I'd like to talk to you about. Any and all of you are welcome to come up and chat with me afterwards. And I thank you for your support of the Center for Justice.
Good evening. My name is Kiara Tate, and I'm a staff attorney with the Mississippi Center for Justice. Although I'm working on several different projects, a large percentage of my time of the work that I'm currently engaged in is focused on community redevelopment. So as some of you here may have heard, MCJ recently received a 3-year grant to provide technical legal assistance to individuals, groups, and organizations that are engaged in blight elimination and community redevelopment work in Jackson and the Mississippi Delta. If you drive through the west side of Jackson, Mississippi, or East Morehead, a city in the Mississippi Delta, you'll see neighborhoods strewn with abandoned houses, which were once homes that belonged to families. Some of these homes were lost to fires, which were caused by cheap and faulty wiring that the developers used to maximize their profits, which created a hazardous environment for homeowners and their families. Other homes have been left vacant for years after the deaths of the people who lived in them. Sometimes the surviving family members do not have the money to probate the wills, and in some cases there is no will, and the property is left to rot and decay. These abandoned properties often create problems for those who continue to live around them. Squatters may move in, they can become havens for criminal activity or perceived havens for criminal activity, and surrounding property values may decrease. So aside from the nuisance issues that can affect the people living in those neighborhoods, local government also loses when these properties are allowed to become vacant and unloved lots because they don't generate any property taxes, which can then be used to support local schools and other public services. And most importantly, these properties could help low-income families build and transfer wealth from generation to generation, but they can't do that if they're just sitting there vacant and abandoned. So while we're not in the business of buying, clearing out, and repurposing these properties ourselves, We are here to provide the required legal assistance to those who are doing just that. For example, we are conducting title searches and will generate certificates of title that our community partners can then use to decide if it makes sense to acquire a particular property to then repurpose and use later for affordable housing or turn into a community garden. These are some of the things that our community partners want to do. So we also plan to assist with quieting title and rezoning issues. Our community partners for this project, which include Capital Area Habitat for Humanity, the Jackson Housing Authority, and Hope Community Development Association, have expressed to us how timely and needed our help is to them. And finally, in addition to providing legal assistance, this project also includes an education and outreach component and the creation of a pro bono panel to help push along the work. So we intend to take what we learned during this project and go out into the community to inform others about the need for cleaning up and restoring abandoned properties. We want to inform them about the challenges associated with that work and the best practices. The pro bono panel, which we are currently developing, will help us to meet the capacity demands of the community redevelopment work while engaging local attorneys in a project that is funded by the Mississippi Bar Foundation. And I would like to add that this money, these funds, do come from the Mississippi Bar Foundation, but those funds actually came from the Bank of America settlement grant program, which we all know was created by former Attorney General Eric Holder, who is here with us. So we are very thankful for that. So in closing, we are very excited about this work, and we expect to have great success and wonderful results to report over the next 3 years. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Rob McDuff. I was fortunate enough to be among a group of Mississippi lawyers who organized the Mississippi Center for Justice in 2003. I was vice chair of the board for many years, and last year, the center and I joined together to initiate the George Riley Impact Litigation Project, which was conceived by our wonderful director, Riley Morse, who secured the funding from Apple and the Emerson Collective to stake this project for 10 years. In honor of the late George Riley, a longtime lawyer for Apple and a longtime member of MCJ's board, who first became acquainted with the work of the center during his extensive pro bono work in Mississippi after Hurricane Katrina. So as we enter the second year of this project, I just wanted to mention a few of the cases that we are working on now to battle discrimination on the basis of race, national origin, poverty, and sexual orientation. These cases involve voting rights, police misconduct, government misconduct, workplace conditions, reproductive choice, and the rights of prisoners to read books. Our challenge to Mississippi's 1890 constitutional provision that disenfranchises people who are convicted of what were deemed at the time to be black crimes is in full swing right now. We have trials set early next year in time for a remedy to be imposed prior to the 2019 statewide elections. We are joined in that case by 3 lawyers who have legendary records of civil rights litigation in Mississippi: Fred Banks, Armand Durfner, and our own board member David Lipman. We will soon be filing a redistricting case to create a new majority black African American state Senate district in the Mississippi Delta, the poorest region of the poorest state in the country. We'll be joined in that case by the National Office of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law, again, hopefully in time to impose a remedy for the 2019 elections. The week before last, we were in trial in Gulfport, Mississippi, representing 6 black-owned funeral homes on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, along with our co-counsel from the civil rights law firm of Lovie and Lovie in Chicago. After 4 days of trial, we reached a late-night settlement requiring the county to pay damages to those funeral homes and requiring the coroner to institute a new rotation policy for public business that goes to the funeral homes in rotation rather than nearly all of it going to the 2 white-owned funeral homes, as was the case prior to this litigation. The center is joining with Southern Migrant Legal Services in a case seeking damages for discrimination and workplace harassment against migrant workers in a chicken plant in East Mississippi. Along with the Southern Poverty Law Center, we will be filing a lawsuit this summer about the arrest and detention of a Hispanic family driving down a notorious interstate corridor through Mississippi, where this happens with some frequency, unfortunately. And depending on our investigation and our discovery, that may turn into an even broader-based challenge to this practice as people drive through Mississippi. We filed last month a broad-based challenge, along with the Center for Reproductive Rights and the Paul Weiss Law Firm, against a whole host of Mississippi laws that are targeted at the state's only abortion clinic and the women it serves, particularly a requirement that women seeking an abortion must come to the clinic twice. The first time for so-called counseling that is mandated by the state, and the second time at least 24 hours later for the actual procedure, which is a real burden on the many poor women that clinic serves, who have to drive sometimes great distances, take time away from children, take time away from their jobs. And we're also challenging a ban that the Mississippi legislature has imposed specifically on abortion doctors, so they cannot practice telemedicine like every other doctor can now in Mississippi, to provide counseling to the people over the video so they won't have to make 2 trips. In addition, we are challenging, as part of this same lawsuit, a new ban on abortions after 15 weeks in Mississippi, which was immediately enjoined by the federal court as soon as it took effect, but which the governor and the legislature are hoping is going to reach the Supreme Court to take a big chunk out of Roe versus Wade. So we will be in the middle of that. We are joining with Lambda Legal in a lawsuit against the South Mississippi Funeral Home for failing to properly honor a contract to bury a man after they discovered that his spouse was also a man. Just last week, we were joined by the DLA Piper firm in filing a lawsuit on behalf of 2 Mississippi prisoners and an organization called Big House Books, which distributes donated books to prisoners who request them through the mail and request history books or novels or whatever, and they send them to the prisoners. And we're challenging a new policy instituted at one of the prisons that now prohibits free books from being mailed to prisoners by distributors unless they're religious. So we said in our press release that books are a good thing and free books are particularly good, and they're particularly important for people in prisons who would like to read them. And finally, we are working with our friends at the MacArthur Center for Public Justice Mississippi office to review a new comprehensive set of data about the jail population throughout Mississippi and Mississippi's various counties and cities in order to target and bring suit against the most extreme jurisdictions who are keeping people in jail because they cannot afford to pay fines and fees and unreasonable amounts of bail. So we're very excited about the weeks and months and years to come with this project. As you can see, we often work with other organizations and with law firms, so if you all are interested in working with us, it would be a great opportunity. There are going to be many more cases that need to be filed, and it's going to be a very interesting time as we move forward. Thank you very much. Thank you for your support.
Isn't this great work? Doesn't it really grab you? And you haven't yet heard about consumer protection work or healthcare work. We don't have time tonight, but if you come down to Jackson this October, we can fill you in on some more extraordinary advocacy by our team. I'm so proud of you all. Thank you. Before turning to our honorees, please allow me now a brief word about someone who made a big difference in the success of our organization over the better part of the past decade. He's been a gifted executive coach and a development consultant to founding President Martha Bergmark and to me, the successor. He has an incisive mind. He is a true believer in social justice, and he has been a brilliant advisor to the Mississippi Center for Justice. Please join me now in thanking our dear friend and colleague, Norman Rosenberg.
Just a quick word. This means a great deal. It's wonderful to hear those tributary words, but most especially what was wonderful was having the opportunity to work at the center, serve its staff and board for 10 years. It was really a great honor. Everybody in this room knows how great this organization is. If you didn't know before, listening to these three people certainly gave you an indication of the power of this work. This is a great organization. They never back down. They never give up. They have a remarkable track record of success, and they are worthy of every dollar that you can possibly muster to enable them to fight for racial injustice and economic justice for every Mississippian. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Let's make the picture here. Tonight is a terrific night. We have two extraordinary honorees, and a clear signal of how wonderful our honorees are is the marvelous people who agreed readily, eagerly to introduce them. To introduce our first honoree, please welcome a peerless advocate for children's rights, the founder and president of the Children's Defense Fund, who began her career in Jackson, Mississippi, as the first Black woman admitted to the Mississippi Bar, and a 2014 Mississippi Center for Justice Potomac honoree, Marion Wright Edelman.
Thank you for coming out. Oh, sit down. Thank you for coming out to celebrate this wonderful organization. I tell you, it makes me so mad to see how little has changed, and I mean, it is hard work trying to get these folks to do the right thing for its children and its citizens. And I just want to salute you. Thank you for coming out to support them, and I just celebrate the work that's here. And I am so pleased to celebrate. We're going to talk about how old we are. My over half-century friend, Joyce Ladner, and she has a terrific, she's just wonderful. And, she grew up in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, graduated from Tougaloo, the Tougaloo people here went on to get her PhD at WashU in St. Louis, and I'm just so proud of her. I don't know what in the world to do, but she was a fighter from the beginning. As a child, and she was a part of the NAACP youth chapter in her hometown at Hattiesburg. And at Tougaloo, she was very courageous and rebellious as a student leader in the civil rights movement in Mississippi. She was a field secretary for SNCC, and she helped do the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, which we were all privileged to have been born at the right time with the right issues to kind of get out all of our frustrations and use our energy. And Joyce was a big one in Mississippi, helped organize voter registrations across the state and protests along the civil rights leaders who came through there. And she was somebody who tried to go to worship at a Methodist, white Methodist church and got herself into trouble. You know, she's been a warrior from the very earliest days. And when she was a senior at Tougaloo, she helped join and form the Council on Federated Organizations, COFO, which tried to coordinate SNCC and CORE and NAACP and others. And I was so privileged to be able to go into the state about this time in 1963 as a civil rights lawyer, and to be there for the Mississippi Summer Project of 1964, which began to open up that closed-door society. But Joyce has been involved in all of those, and I'm just so proud of her. And when the March on Washington needed help, she went up to Harlem to help organize folk, to get folk to there and raise money. And so she has been a long-distance runner. And her contributions to challenging civil rights and women's rights, discrimination against women and black folk and others, is a study in what we need to have as a piece of our training of the next generation. I mean, Joyce and Dory, her sister, have been terrific. She did some postdoctoral research at the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, and she has been a professor at a number of colleges and universities after she did her organizing work, including Southern Illinois University and Hunter College. In 1995, she came up here. President Clinton appointed her to the District of Columbia Financial Control Board to oversee financial restructuring of the DC public school system. She then became a senior fellow for the Governance of Studies program at Brookings. I learned some stuff when I did this research. I mean, I didn't know you did all this stuff. This is wonderful. I had a warp after Mississippi. But then she was a part as well of the U.S. Department of Justice Advisory Committee on Violence Against Women and is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. She served as a board member for many civic and professional organizations, including the American Sociological Society, the Minority Center for the National Institute of Mental Health, the Society for the Study of Social Problems, the 21st Century Foundation, the Caucus of Black Sociologists, and the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. She's been active with the Washington Urban League, the Washington Women's Forum, and the Coalition of 100 Black Women. She's been a long-distance runner, but she's also found time to be an author, and she has written a number of books and scholarly publications, including Tomorrow's Tomorrow, The Black Woman, a pioneering contribution to African American women's study. She's gotten a lot of really well-deserved honors, and this one tonight is well-deserved, and I'm just so pleased to be able to salute her. I like the fact that she has been that. It's hard. I mean, you know, this stuff is hard. And the harder you work, and it goes back, you think you won something and move forward, and then it goes back, and again, you have to get it back to where it was and move it a little bit further. But she's been a long-distance warrior, and I'm so pleased and proud of her scholarship, of her activism, of her staying power, of her wisdom, and of knowing her. I just always have felt so blessed to have been born at the intersection of great events and great people and great challenges that we could change. And Joy, you're really a part of that, and I'm just so honored to honor you tonight. So come on up here and let us celebrate you.
Thank you so much. The first time I met Marion, she was running down the street of Greenwood, Mississippi, screaming, "Where's the payphone? Where's the payphone? I got to call the Justice Department." And I looked around at her. I was intrigued by the fact that a black woman knew someone to call in the Justice Department. I was not about to rush to help her find the phone. I just took notice. You know someone in the Justice Department in Mississippi in the Delta of Greenwood in 1963? It was spring break, and she had just come down for spring break to work from Yale Law School, where she was a student. So after I took great measure of the fact that here was a black woman, a young, fine young black woman, she was fancy, who knew someone in the Justice Department to call, because we didn't know. We knew who our supposed congressmen were. We wouldn't dare go to their office and ask them for any dischargement of their responsibility toward us. But so I finally turned around and said, okay, I'll take you to the payphone. She said, I got to call the Justice Department because the police are turning loose the dogs on the demonstrators. And I said, yes, they are. I think it was probably the first time you'd seen that. And then she told me years later, after she got John Doerr on the phone, he said, calm down and tell me what happened. Because she was on all cylinders, as was I. I mean, I was standing there looking to see, let's see how this plays out, you know? But I am deeply humbled and grateful to be honored tonight by the Mississippi Center for Justice. And I'm especially pleased to have been introduced by Marion, whom I met back there in 1963. I'm also honored to receive this award along with Robert Raymond, whose legal work in Mississippi surely informed the racial justice work he is doing through the March on Washington Film Festival, and that his firm is doing in other ways in DC as well. I grew up in a small, all-black community of a few hundred people called Palmer's Crossing, outside Hattiesburg, Mississippi. It's 4 miles from downtown. By the time I got to college, I had been a member of the NAACP Youth Council in Hattiesburg and was mentored by Clyde Kennard and Medgar Evers, as well as Vernon Damer, all of whom were martyrs for the civil rights movement. By the time I got to Jackson State, soon afterwards, I was expelled. My sister Doria and I were expelled for participating in the civil rights protest. See, the Tougaloo College students had been arrested and for sitting in at the public library. And Medgar had told Doria and me to try to get students to meet in some kind of a sympathy protest. We and other students did so that night on campus, and the president of the college, Reddix, came over and slapped my roommate, knocked her to the ground. And a few weeks later, we were told that we were expelled. We were 17 and 18 years old, and not to be outdone, so we told the dean that we're glad, we hate this place. You're stricter than mother. And we're going to Tougaloo. We hadn't talked to our folks at all about transferring. But I was so happy to be, it was a blessing in disguise, because to go to Tougaloo College was the most important thing that could have happened in my young life. Because Tougaloo gave me my wings to fly. The only liberal arts college in Mississippi, black liberal arts college. And the place that is now known as the Civil Rights College. Because any and everyone came to Tougaloo. It was the only place where integrated groups could meet. At that time, there were only 3 or 4 black lawyers in the entire state, 3 of whom handled civil rights cases. They were R.J. Brown, Jack Young, and Carsey Hall. There was another, and 2 of them had read for the bar, and one had gone to law school. R.J. Brown went to law school. There was a fourth lawyer, but he only handled the weekend drunk cases. In 1961, when the Freedom Riders came, it was Jess Brown and Carson Hall and Jack Young who represented them. It was these three lawyers who defended most of the civil rights workers throughout. Most African Americans had no legal representation. 3 black lawyers were located in Jackson, and even if people wanted to hire them, they was out of their reach. It was heresy for an African American to file a complaint against a white person. In 1959, I remember when we pinned such high hopes on R.J. Brown because we expected that he would exonerate a young black man named Mac Charles Parker, who was jailed in Poplarville for allegedly raping a white woman. You see, this occurred 15 to 20 miles from my home. Attorney Brown didn't save Mac Parker because he was dragged from his jail cell and lynched before the trial. The ranks of these 3 lawyers grew enormously in 1964 when the Legal Defense Fund's Marion Wright Edelman came and opened an office in Jackson. When the Lawyers Committee brought students and lawyers to the state, when Mississippi Freedom Summer arrived and hundreds of mostly white students came to volunteer for that summer, the Lawyers Guild and others provided representation. Awards are given to individuals, but so many others help them to achieve them. That was certainly the case with me, because Mississippi civil rights organizers and activists whom I knew, such as Medgar Evers, Fannie Lou Hamer, Marion Wright Edelman, of course, Bob Moses come to mind. 3 of my civil rights mentors, Vernon Damer, who died because his home was firebombed and shot into by the Klan, Clyde Kennard, who was framed and sent to Parchman Penitentiary for receiving stolen property of about $6, $7 worth of chicken feed, sent to prison for 7 years, and was released only weeks, I would say a couple of months before he died of stomach cancer. And of course, Medgar Evers, whom I had known since high school when he came to Hattiesburg to organize our NAACP youth chapter. I knew 2 of the 3 civil rights workers who were murdered in the summer of '64. They were my friends. I was a member of SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee that Marion mentioned. We called ourselves the Green Beret because we were bad, young, courageous, break all rules people, young people. Bob Moses has said that we were a group of about 30 young people throughout Mississippi who were determined to get the right to vote for all Mississippians. The numbers were never very large. But during that time, I failed the voter registration literacy test 3 times when I was in college. The voting registrar, the infamous Theron Lynn, failed the vast majority of African Americans and passed. In fact, he would get on his phone and call white people to say, "You're registered now." I was finally registered to vote by a federal court order. In other words, the struggle waged by my generation made life better for some of those that followed. Yet there are still a lot of problems that I did not anticipate almost 60 years ago. The plight of poor children in Mississippi is as bad as it is in some developing countries. And you heard testimony to that tonight. Poverty and unemployment, opiate addiction, massive incarcerations of black men and women, high school dropout and high unemployment rates, and the fact that most of the wealth is still concentrated in the hands of a few whites, as well as the wanton disregard disregard for black lives by the police are still some of the problems that exist. Yet, in closing, I'm grateful that Riley Morris and his staff and board at the Mississippi Center for Justice is giving a measure of hope through legal services to those who truly need them. And although we have graduated from voting rights to the infinitely more complicated, more complex issues that your staff raised here tonight, I remain optimistic, because what else do we have but to be hopeful? Thank you.
To introduce our second honoree, please join me in welcoming a preeminent leader in legal reform, from criminal justice to voting rights to redistricting, someone whom you know as the 82nd Attorney General of the United States, the Honorable Eric Holder.
Thank you. It is good to be here this evening, and it is telling to hear those stories, both those from times past and from times of the present, to see that, you know, we have made progress as a nation, and Mississippi has made progress as a state, but we are still imperfect. There is still much work that needs to be done. I've known our next honoree for about 20 years. I was trying to figure this out, and it seemed to me that was extraordinarily long, but I think that is the case, Robert. We worked together first in the Department of Justice during the Clinton administration, when Robert was the Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Legislative Affairs. I saw him operate in that difficult position with skill, with grace, and with good humor, forcefully and really effectively advocating for the administration without unnecessarily antagonizing the Republican opposition, something that I didn't do too well. I should have learned more from him. There were some sound words of advice I remember that you gave me during that time that I didn't perhaps apply in the Obama administration. You should have been there with me, should have been with me then. As much as I liked and admired Robert, Janet Reno loved him, and we were all jealous about that, you know? It was kind of, we had these positions and titles and everything, and then Robert would walk in the room and her face would light up, and it was justified. She saw in him the skills that he had, the dedication that he had, the commitment that he had. His government service at the Justice Department, and before that, a long and storied career up on the Hill in Congress, was principled and was in the best interests of the people and for justice. He formed the Raymond Group in 2002, a now highly successful public policy firm that represents clients seeking to open the doors of power for a positive, lasting, inclusive change. And he's shown that in the economic sphere, there is not a tension between doing well and doing good. Robert works to drive public policy in a humane direction to bring diversity and enlightened thinking to the boardrooms, think tanks, and corporations in this nation. He's now a private citizen, but he's a public-private citizen. He's worked tirelessly to construct a fair judiciary and to influence legislation to broaden and make permanent civil rights protections. Robert was an ally and a key advisor as the Obama administration set out really broad reforms of our criminal justice system. He was a sounding board, a person you could go to and ask, well, where do you think the problem exists? What about this potential solution? And he always has a way of letting you know, in a nice way, well, that's about the dumbest thing I've heard, Eric. But he makes you think that you somehow reached the conclusion that that wasn't a good idea on your own. He has been a champion for the nation's children by working to improve our educational system as well. In what little spare time he has, he founded the March on Washington Film Festival that has grown exponentially in recent years. People are going to be forgetting about all these other ones, you know, the Robert Redford thing, you know, they're going to be forgetting about it. This is going to be the place to be. It's now a major cultural event in the country and exposes the people in our nation to truths that were too little known, too long forgotten, or too long suppressed. He is a man of business, a man of the arts, and more importantly, a man of the truth. He is a force for economic and racial justice. He has made our nation better. I simply cannot think of a more worthy recipient of the Mississippi Center for Justice Honor than my dear friend and my former and still colleague, Robert Raymond. I'm proud to stand with him tonight as he receives this prestigious and well-deserved award. Robert.
Thank you very much, Attorney General Holder Eric. Thank you for making me cry. I realize I have introduced you many, many times, but you've not introduced me, and wow, thank you so, so much. And for being here. I'm a little mad at you for being here. Every minute you're here, you're not in Wisconsin fighting for our democracy, in Pennsylvania fighting for our democracy. Eric's work in leading the redistricting effort is going to make an enormous difference in access and fairness that those of us who care about substantive policy are fighting for. So thank you for your continued commitment. And Attorney Franklin for putting a bug in Attorney General Holder's ear to probably be here tonight. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Dr. Ladner, I want to yield you my time. And hear more. It's an incredible honor to be even on the same stage as you, but Dr. Ladner is a part of our film festival, has appeared, and my guess is no good deed goes unpunished. She'll be back. So thank you for your enormous heart and spirit. And Riley and your staff, you're obviously kicking ass. So thank you. I hope you met your financial goals tonight. If not, Mr. Rosenberg and I are happy to do what we do in church, which is pass the hat and get you to your goal. But thank you for your fight on behalf of the people of Mississippi and the nation. I love Mississippi. It's an improbable thing to say. I'm from Florida. I had no prior connection to Mississippi until I lived there. And I loved living there. It had me with hello. I lived in Jackson. I went down to work for the Supreme Court. I was a clerk first for Judge Jimmy Lee Robertson, and then did a side gig with Justice Reuben Anderson. And I don't know that they'd seen the likes of me. I was 23. I had a ponytail. I had an earring. I was an open Jew and a closeted homosexual. The latter they'd probably had before. The former, I'm not sure. But they knew about my presence before I was there. My first day, there was a justice named Zaccaro, Judge Joseph Zaccaro from Natchez, and he was the only Catholic on the court. That apparently was a big deal. They referred to him as the papist. And Zaccaro made a beeline for me on my first day, came right over in the hallway. There were many, many clerks. He just made a beeline for me. I don't know how he knew it was me. You're that fella from New York? No, I'm from Miami, but I know what you mean. This was an hour after Chief Judge Roy Noble Lee had, with glee, sworn me in over the Confederate flag, which was not the flag of Mississippi, but he swore me in over the Confederate flag. Zucaro, with whom I had no conversation prior to this moment, grabbed my tie, which was a bright green, which I regret. Raymond, I'm a little surprised at your sartorial choice. Haven't your people been in dry goods for millennia? To which I fell instantly in love with Judge Zucaro. I lived in Belhaven. I lived behind the Church's Fried Chicken. I am the only person, I am sure, that had his own table at Church's Fried Chicken. I ate well in Mississippi. I came back 5 years later under sad but important circumstances. I was then the counsel, the Democratic counsel to the House Judiciary Committee, and there was some increasing abuse going on at a place called Sister Camp, Sister Spirit. Sister Spirit was improbable. It was a lesbian compound in Ovette, Mississippi. And the county and municipality and state were doing nothing to protect them from an increasing abuse, including violence. So Congressman Barney Frank, one of the members for whom I worked, Jerry Nadler, from whom I worked, John Conyers, it was quite a lineup, decided to have a field hearing in Mississippi to try to draw attention to this and the lack of protection. And we had a field hearing on abuse to lesbians in Ovette, Mississippi in the early 90s. There were protesters chanting throughout the hearing, "Sodomy sucks. Sodomy sucks." To which Congressman Barney Frank loudly said to me, and I don't know if we could hear it in the crowd, "What side do you think they're on?" I hope that was okay for your children. The entire Galloway family is here. But the more meaningful connection I had with Mississippi came many years later. I happily accompanied Congressman John Lewis on an annual pilgrimage that he does, usually to Alabama, but one year we went to Mississippi. And we found ourselves appropriately in Ruleville, and which is where Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer worked on the Marlowe plantation and began her work with others to change the course of this nation. And I was struck at the conversations we were having there and a little vigil we had. There's a memorial, many of you have probably been to it, to Mrs. Hamer. It's a bronze-ish statue of her, and it's dignified, and it's beautiful, and it's under a cupola or next to a cupola. And regrettably, and this is no indignity to AT&T, it says on the bottom of it, sponsored by AT&T. And my heart literally broke. God bless AT&T. But I realized this woman, and you all know her, and you were friends with her and worked with her, and I'm jealous of you for that, who made it through the 5th grade, who had her entire life in this milieu on the Marlowe and other plantations, and through tenacity and spirit and courage and the support of others, formed a party, took on a president, took on a nation, literally brought us closer to the promise of America, which is yet unfulfilled, but closer. And nowhere in this nation is a bridge, is a tunnel, is an airport. Nothing. There is this bronze statue and people's memories. And that is an injustice, and it is an indignity. I came back and with some friends decided to start a platform, which we now call the March on Washington Film Festival, which is meant to do our part to remedy this. Our history is consciously mistold. This is not an accident. Children are not taught our history for very distinct reasons. And so we provide what is a growing year-round platform for people to tell the truth, first-person narrative, second-person narrative, through film and art and scholarship. There's student civil rights competitions, there are film competitions, there's journalism support to focus on accurate representations of our history, stories not told, stories mistold. The audience support is off the charts, which tells me, as does the new African American Museum, there's an enormous hunger for many of us to learn the truth. And we are dedicated to that. And I need you to join us. I need you to bring content. I'll stop with the following, although there are many, many examples of what I'm about to say. In doing this festival, we learned, and Eric knows this because he appeared with her at least once, there was a fifth little girl in that basement at the 16th Street Baptist Church. And her name was Sarah Collins, and now it's Sarah Collins Rudolph. Her sister, Addie Mae Collins, died. And she was partially blinded but did not die. She was 9. And she lives today in Birmingham. She is or under-recognized. There is no apology. There is no victim's compensation. She is an American living witness to state-sponsored terrorism. She, like many others, we have a lot of work to do to draw attention to living people, the children of people, the families and communities of people. What Mr. Stevenson is doing in Montgomery is an important piece of this, but we're all a part of it. I thank you for honoring the work that we're trying to do. I thank you for your support of this important organization. I challenge you, whatever you're doing, do just a little bit more. Thank you all very much.
Well, I want to bring us to a close here shortly by just saying this has been one extraordinary night to sit this close to this podium and listen to the 4 voices we heard here, preceded by the 3 voices from our staff. It is something that galvanizes your spirit. It's something that builds the determination to keep to the work that we've committed ourselves to. And I thank all of you, each one of you, who has brought that spirit into this room. It's why we do this event in Washington. It's what helps raise the money that keeps our work going, and I thank each of you for your terrific, terrific contributions to tonight. I want to thank all of you for joining us here tonight and offer a reminder for those of you who are tempted to make a deeper dive into this state, this strange and wonderful state that so captured the spirit of the people you've heard here, that we host a great Mississippi road trip. It comes this October 18th through 21st. It begins at the home of Medgar Evers. It continues to the new Mississippi Civil Rights Museum, and then it ends with 2 nights in the most southern place on earth, the Mississippi Delta. Please consider coming and joining us for it. You can learn more. You can learn more about it on our website. So, to wrap things up, as all of my papers have been scrambled unaccountably, here we go. Sorry about that, folks. I will conclude by saying thanks to each and every one of you for your assistance tonight, for your energy and your enthusiasm. I wish you all safe travels home. I wish a good night to you all, and we hope to see you next year. Thank you all.